Alright, hello and welcome back to Zero Cool Gaming, and today we're going to be doing a review of a game called Condemned 2 Bloodshot.
Lieutenant, I'm a friend of Ethan Thomas. He must be warned. He must know that it's not over. I've tried contacting him, but... Right there. I said stop! He found me. I don't have much time.
Why? Because this damn city's too fucking blind to see what's happening.
Alright, now I guess you could call this a horror game. It's kind of a horror game. It's kind of an investigation game. It's kind of a cult game, and it's kind of a demon possession game. I mean, there's lots of things going on here, truly. So, the game starts out where you have this guy making a phone call to an agency. And he makes this phone call just before he gets killed. And of course they recorded the phone call. And then after reporting this to their superior says that they need to bring a guy in on this case that was relieved of duty a few years prior for charges that he was found innocent of committing. And then it switches over to the guy that he was talking about. And he's sitting in a bar, drinking, doing some type of pills that he crushes up and puts into his drink. And while he's drinking, another person walks by him and deliberately hits him in the back. And when he gets up and he sees what this person looks like, he starts beating him until he beats him half to death. And then the bartender tells him to get out of his bar. While outside, he meets up with somebody who also drinks a lot, and he tells him he knows where there's some alcohol. And you work your way through the alleyways until you find the area where he tells you the alcohol is, but somebody else has drank it. When you finally wake that person up, he looks just like the guy that you beat in the bar. And then you gotta fight some other guys, and eventually that same person that looks this way knocks you out with a brick. And then you have a very odd dream about meeting up with people you used to work for and taking on a case and just doing all sorts of strange stuff. And then you wake up from that dream and you see that the people that you once worked for are there, and they tell you that they need your help on a case. So very odd, to say the least. And as you're leaving, you feel like you're being watched. And the game shows that behind you there's a bunch of things watching you, but when you turn around to look, there's nothing there. So you start the case after listening to the tape, and you know exactly who the person on the tape is. And they tell you that this is where he called from, so you head to that area and you start searching the building for the person that was on the tape. You run into what they call a bunch of meth heads. but it's obvious that whatever they're on is far from meth. And you continue to work your way through. Eventually, you talk to a couple of people who seem to be somewhat normal. And then, as you continue to work your way through, you dodge a couple of environmental hazards like elevators that fall down shafts for no apparent reason, old ladders that come apart, these sorts of things. Well, eventually you find an officer who's been shot, and you investigate, but it's not the officer that you're looking for. Then you eventually find remnants of the officer you are looking for, but you don't find his body. And then finally, you find the body of the man you're looking for. And it's obvious that he's been killed in some ritualistic manner. So you take pictures of the body and you send all of that back to the liaison back at the headquarters. And she starts hearing some very odd things being said over the airways. And on top of that, she notices something very strange about the body itself. And then they tell you to grab the body and get out of there. And there'll be an evac helicopter waiting for you. Well, while all this was going on, a riot had started happening in the area, and lots of people were preventing traffic from getting in and out of that area. And as you start to move through the town itself, you realize very quickly that these rioters are not rioters. They're something else. But regardless, they're also not meth heads. So you work your way through them. Your other team members damn near kill you and then leave you behind to die because they don't care about you. And you eventually make your way to a dollhouse to try to meet up with the liaison that you've been working with from the headquarters. And of course, inside the dollhouse, you meet up with your first boss battle. It's a little odd. You see these things that look like human-sized dolls running around. You end up helping a guy who tries to tell you that things are not as they seem and that something else has happened to these people. You know that there's electronic devices set up all over the town that are designed to essentially brainwash people, but nobody's taking responsibility for installing these devices. And then you got the whole ritualistic thing that just doesn't make sense yet. You know, why kill him in that way? Why are these other rituals happening in such a grotesque manner? You know, what's going on here besides a bunch of drug addicts? Not that there's any, forthcoming answers right off, obviously. They want you to delve deeper and try to figure it out. The game itself is played from a first-person experience. And it's, I guess you could say, an FPS. But it's an FPS where you use a lot of melee weapons and environmental weapons to actually disable or kill your foes, where your guns by themselves are nowhere near enough to fend off the amount of enemies that you have to deal with. So you really got to think outside the box and figure out what it is that the game is providing you to deal with the enemies in your area that you have to deal with. You know, sometimes you electrocute them, sometimes you burn them, sometimes you want to trap them, or just create a blockade that they can't get past, these sorts of things. There's all sorts of different answers to these problems, which is one of the things that I like about this game. I'm not really a fan of horror games in general, but this one's a little odd, to say the least. So, most of it I can deal with. Parts of it are pretty outside my realm and not something that I would normally play, but I deal with it and move forward. But I guess you could say the part of the game that kept drawing me back was the storyline itself and the mysteries that were surrounding it. You know, how did all this happen? Why did all this happen? And why was it allowed to happen? That's really what it boils down to. There were so many different ways that this could have been prevented long before it got as bad as it was. But nobody did anything to do that.
Are you ready to begin?
And while when this game was created, that seemed just, completely outlandish to me. When I look at what's happening in the world today, in a lot of these liberal cities, yeah, I think this is the type of sick, twisted, demented world they want to create. Not to this extreme, but drug addicts all over the alleyways and the sidewalks, homeless people everywhere, police not following the laws at all, arresting, law-abiding citizens while letting criminals run amok, these sorts of things. Yeah, I can see why this sort of dystopian nightmare, which is this game, could become a reality. Because we have sick, twisted, corrupt politicians in our justice system that's willing to allow for this sort of thing to happen and get as bad as it has. And they don't do a damn thing to fix it. And they never will. The only thing that's going to fix it is for people to stand up against it and demand that these laws be rescinded and that actual laws be put in their place to arrest, try, and convict criminals for the crimes they commit. And until people are willing to force their government to do that, whether it be the city, county, or state government, it will continue to get worse. It's not going to get better just because you want it to. It's blatantly obvious from what they've shown you already. They want things to get much, much worse. Alright, so once you exit the dollhouse, you actually meet up with the agent you've been working with. And then she tells you that her car's not too far away, and that she's going to take you back to headquarters for a debriefing. When you get back to headquarters, you investigate first the dead body that was retrieved from the hotel that you were in. And during that investigation, she found that there was something odd with the vocal cords. Mainly that they had been removed. But even before they were removed, it's obvious that there was something odd about them. And then she brings up the fact that when they were taking x-rays of you, that your vocal cords were top secret information and blacked out on the x-rays. For whatever reason. And then she decides that she would like to take some MRI scans of your chest and vocal cords to see what's so special about them. While you're doing the MRI scan, you have some very odd visions about people dying in the facility that you're at. Severe changes happening to the facility that you're at. And then once the scan's complete, of course, you wake up and you're back in the room that you were originally taking the MRI scan. Then she tells you that the director wants to see you for a debriefing. And you go up there, and initially you start answering his questions until he pulls the gun on you. And then you have a more intense conversation with him about how the guy that he sent to work with you was obviously trying to kill you. And he didn't seem to care much for the other member of his team either. And the director tries to assure you that he was trying to protect you and keep you alive, and that the other guy that tried to kill you was acting on orders not given by him. So you go back downstairs and you have a conversation with the lady that you've been working with. And she tells you that it might be a good idea to continue the investigation from the first murder. But right now you need to go investigate a second murder of another employee of the organization that she works for, who was found at a local museum. When you get to the museum, you find a decapitated body that's been pretty badly mutilated, and you receive strict orders to not go into the museum and investigate until other members arrive. And yeah, you don't follow those orders. So you go ahead and enter the museum and you start looking around. You find the place where she was killed. You find a implement, some type of saw that was used to most likely cut into her body. And you find fingerprints on it that match a guy that's supposed to be dead. And then you continue your investigation, and then you find well, it was probably a torture table, was used to remove a bunch of metal parts from that girl's body. And needless to say, it's a little odd, to say the least. And you try to continue your investigation, and eventually you end up going up against your second boss battle, which is a crazed lunatic in medieval armor that you have to take down. They're pretty tough. See, eventually you take them down, and then as you're making your way toward the rendezvous point, an officer tries to help you. Eventually that officer gets killed, and then when you actually get to where you're supposed to be, the guy who tried to kill you earlier is there, and he's none too happy to see you, of course. But nonetheless, you're told to work with him. And then the lady that you've been working with the whole time tells you that it might be a good idea to go up north and investigate this resort, ski lodge, to see if the first murder victim, and apparently the guy who's been doing the murders most recently, had been in that area recently. So you get in a car with the guy who wants you dead. He drives you to the airport, and then you hear over his mic that the target has boarded the plane. So you obviously have a target painted on your back, to say the least. But you don't know who he was talking to. And while you're flying your way north to go check out this other facility, you have a vision, and you talk with something. And then when you wake up from that vision, the pilot of the plane is dead, and you crash land rather than land near the facility that you're supposed to be investigating anyway. On the way to the facility, you find a pretty mangled arm that's been ripped off of somebody not too long ago, about 6 hours ago, from the time that it currently is, from the time that's on his watch that it just stopped. And you continue to work your way toward the facility. On your way there, you see the shadow of something large walking on all fours, and you definitely don't want to get near whatever that is. Then you make your way inside, and you find the body of the guy who, most likely the arm belonged to. And upon searching his personals, you find his wallet, and he's another person who works for the company. And in fact, he's one of the men that worked directly under the man who was trying to kill you. So, as you investigate further into the building itself, you find that there's more of his men who were sent there than just one. And it would appear that all of them, or at least most of them, are dead at this point. And there's a very large bear that's killing them. It's been injured, but it doesn't seem to be too disturbed about the injuries that it sustained. And eventually that bear starts chasing you, which leads to a pretty intense chase scene. And yeah, it's one of those chase scenes that if you get caught, you die, and then you gotta do it all over again. So you learn by trial and error how to get through this. It's far from the first game to put this type of gameplay into action, that's for sure. But you start to realize the more supernatural aspects to this investigation that you're doing as you play through this game. And it's more easy to identify the fact that whatever's going on, it's certainly not something that your average investigator would be able to identify and deal with, not on any rational sense of understanding. And, luckily for you, you're able to deal with the hallucinations that are happening to you without them driving you completely insane. Because I think most people would have been, scared out of their wits at this point. Terrified beyond the ability to move. Frozen in their tracks, so to say. Alright, so you find a living member of the team being run by the guy that wants you dead. And he tells you to pick up his shotgun. There's one bullet left in it. And you're supposed to shoot the propane tanks to kill the bear. Or you can just keep dying over and over again, apparently, until the game leaves you alive outside. I mean, the choice is yours. Truly, this is one of those games where you can basically do anything, and it will carry on regardless of what you do. For the most part. I mean, there's certain fighting, like boss battles and things of that effect, that it requires you to actually beat. But this is another one of those games where the boss battle gets incredibly easier the more times you lose. It's one of those games. And you've probably played games like that before, if you've ever played games. I know I've played a few games where if you keep losing at a particular thing over and over again, it makes it drastically easier for you so that you can just win. I've also played games where every time you die and come back, whatever health the boss was at when you finished your previous run is where it will still be at when you return. So eventually you will kill it regardless. And I've played a few games that do this. This is just one of those type of games. So anyway, moving on. So after you defeat the bear, you learn from a radio transmission from the other members of this team that there is a library and they want to prevent you from accessing that library so that you won't be able to figure anything out from this area. And to prevent you from doing that, they've actually set up a bomb that's designed to destroy the entire house, and they placed explosives all over the house. And then you have to go around and you have to remove all the explosives and throw those outside, then disable the detonator itself, and then you can gain access to the library. While you're in the library learning about what's going on, which is basically the fact that you were genetically altered to be a cure to the infection, that it's basically some kind of demonic infection that's going on, where people are willingly choose to infect themselves and be possessed by demons. And you have the ability to cure them of this infection, which basically amounts to the fact that you can kill them. That's really what curing them means. But regardless, while you're listening to all of this from the doctor who was ritualistically killed at the beginning of the game, they end up shooting the computer that this information is on, and then you got to fight your way through that, and you get your way through that, and eventually the gentleman that was part of the 3-man team at the beginning of the game that was abandoned, at least he didn't try to actively slaughter this man, but he did abandon him and leave him, basically locked out. He locked the gate and things like this to him, left him to be murdered by the crazed lunatics that were after him. He ends up showing up in a snowmobile, busting through the wall. You get aboard the snowmobile, and then you take off into the snow. And while you're traveling out of the area, you learn that the guy who killed the first 2 people has been arrested and he's being detained. So you head to that area and you find that he's being detained on a bus. And you make your way onto the bus and you try to have a conversation with him. Eventually you get distracted. He knocks you out and steals the bus. Takes it to a bowling alley. A bowling alley. He gets off the bus, leaving you alive. You go after him. And you find the head of a victim. You find the body of another victim. And you find a 3rd victim that's not quite dead yet. And the 2 of you work together to get out of there. Eventually you find this guy again, and he actually helps you because he currently sees you as more of a asset than a threat. So he works with you for a little while, and then he leaves. He escapes again. After which you meet back up with the lady that you've been working with since the beginning of the game, and you tell her what you've learned, which is that there's a peninsula, which is basically a giant trash heap, and this apparently is their base command is located in this trash heap, which is, somewhat smart. It keeps people away, that's for sure. And before you can actually get there, you end up using your abilities to kill off a flock of birds that are attacking you and her, and this freaks her out, so she runs away and hides. Then you gotta kill a bunch of creatures off to save her. And after you do so, she apologizes for being freaked out over your abilities. Then, of course, you make your way to the peninsula itself, the trash heap, and you work your way through all of those fights and battles and things to that effect. And you learn while you're doing that that this being that has been contacting you is a manifestation of all of your subconscious thoughts within you, and it's a way of protecting yourself against them. It's like an extra layer of protection between you and the demonic infestation that's going on. Then of course you got to fight the powers that be that, created this sound wave that they're using to alter people's minds to be more violent, aggressive, these sorts of things. Twisting the genetics of humanity through sound, altering the evolution of man through the use of particular sounds. It's an interesting story. I got a kick out of it. And then after you defeat them, you see the crazed lunatic psycho killer being, I guess I should say, finishing the surgeries necessary to completely turn him into one of these demonically possessed beings. And you see that transformation, which means that there's supposed to be a Condemned 3. I don't know if they ever made that particular game, but it's definitely left open at the end of this game for a part 3 if they chose to do so. So yeah, it's not a bad storyline. It's pretty cool. I get a kick out of it. There's some interesting ideas thrown around in it. I wouldn't say it's like, top tier writing. It's not, but it was good enough that I was willing to push through the horror elements of this game, and I don't like horror games, to play all of it, which is a plus in my book for this game. Most of the game is not trying to terrify you. It's trying to convey information and ideas. There are some pretty good jump scares every now and then. There's some pretty gory flash screens every now and then. But it's not so bad that I couldn't get through it.
A bit close, wouldn't you say? Well, you made it. That's the important thing. Anyway, the you-know-what has really hit the fan. You've uncovered something big, and I suspect over the next few weeks more will be weeded out. Good thing, too. Some really influential people belong to the Oro.
Hey, buddy. Soon as they fix that leg up, let's say you and I go get a drink.
I don't think so, LaRue.
Right on. Hey, man. Call me Pierce. My friends call me Pierce.
What I need is some sleep.
Anyway, that's my rant for the day. I hope that you enjoy the rest of yours. If you could hit the like, subscribe, rumble, follow buttons, all that does help. And I will talk to you later.